Hey, it's Craig on my R2 building channel. How crude is your astromech? A lot of the builders who have made some incredible replicas, some of them are more detail oriented than others, and even among those people you can see that you can see how things kind of got messed up. One of our builders has stated that it took twice as long to build their droid because a lot of the stuff they did, they had to redo. And that's the truth with a lot of the old school builders who built their droids from scratch. I'm going to go over some of this stuff that I did back before we had blueprints, and you're going to see how poorly this was done. But it was what it was back in the day. We didn't have blueprints. We didn't have 3D printers. We just did what we had to do. So I'm going to show you what's going on here. I'm going to start out with the leg on this droid. I had never gotten into any of the part runs that the club had back in the early days, except for one. Part runs are pretty much where a builder either finds something that's useful for droid building, or they've created something in their machine shop, in their where they're making molds, and then they offer these parts to the club. In the early days of the R2 Builders Club, we thought that these leg beams were 2 inches by 4 inches, and this was the early days before we had access to any screen-used droids, so we're using what's called picture referencing, where you're taking measurements and you're just kind of hypothesizing how big this is, considering how big, like, the body's 18 inches across. So on a picture, well, if the body is 18 inches, that means that this panel here has to be about 3 inches across. This has to be about, this far across. So the early days, we thought these were 2 inch by 4 inch beams, so I got in on those aluminum beams. And of course, later on we found out that is wrong. But I'm not going to correct it. This droid is a tribute to the early days of the R2 Building Club, so the 2 inch by 4 inch beams, I love them. They are there. It's a testament to the early days. This hydraulic right here, now we're pretty much taking this blue piece and we're cutting it out so a full hydraulic is in there. I left this piece solid. This is just a piece of vinyl window track that wound up not being used on vinyl replacement windows. But this hydraulic was made with PVC pipe that was then cut in half, so this is only half of the PVC hydraulic that was just glued together. This is 1/2 inch CPVC, which if you prime and glue it and cram it in, will fit inside regular 1/2 inch PVC, which will fit inside 3/4 inch PVC, which will fit inside a 3/4 inch PVC coupler. So this is just all pipe inside of pipe inside of pipe inside of coupler. Then it was chopped in half and painted and slapped on. It's amazing how crudely we did things back in the day. This hydraulic wasn't even close to what it was. I threw it together. These buttons right here, there's supposed to be a raised portion in here where that center hole is. This one is supposed to have a slight angle to it. That is so easily correctable. I'm just keeping it the way it was done originally. This ankle, this ankle is embarrassing, but I have to keep it. This was 4 inch PVC foam core, which was heated up and then fit over the beam with wooden pieces pressed against it to take this round pipe, which once it was heated up and softened, was pressed flat on the front, flat on the inside, and flat on the back. That allowed it to still be curved on the outside here. So once it cooled, it was heated up in a half moon here, and once that portion was soft, it was pressed with a rag to make this concaved portion here, which I never did add this triangular wedge that is supposed to be in here. Again, more PVC pipe put on for details. This is embarrassingly, it's thin, not even close. This piece of cookie sheet aluminum here, way too thin, not even close to what it's supposed to be. You can see the evolution of how I did things a little bit better on the other Droid, but how crudely things... We didn't even know back then that there's supposed to be grooves inside these shoulder horseshoes, which was correct on the other Droid. This is not recessed in as far as it should be, because this piece has to be removed to access my mounting for the shoulder pipes. So this is wrong by choice. I tried to make it as accurate as I could, but there's a greater mechanical reason for this being that way. I didn't even have this section here flattened out in the first 15 years of this Droid. I finally had to take a circular saw and make a couple of dozen cuts on here, then take the belt sander and just take this down so this flattened part here was actually done. Early days of the club, these picture frame panels, the way they're supposed to be done is this is supposed to be flush with this, and then this is recessed. But how do you do that on 18-inch PVC pipes? So I just put picture frames on top of the pipe, so this is actually flush with this, and this is raised. That is wrong, but it is what it is. Early days of the R2 Builders Club. My skirt is way too tall. Early days of the club, we didn't know skirt height, so we just made do with what we knew. The Mini, when we started, I started building this around 2004. That's where we realized, hey, there's grooves inside these shoulder horseshoes. So I had taken a construction 16-penny nail and I filed the nail head. So the nail head was like a cutting wheel, and I put it in the drill press, and I brought the drill press down to a certain height, locked it in place, and I ran this shoulder horseshoe with that nail, putting groove around the whole thing. When I got done with that, I reset the depth on the drill press, locked it in, put the second groove in, did it again, brought it down a little bit more, locked it in place, did the third groove. So all of my grooves are in there because just a few short years earlier, we didn't know these things were supposed to be grooved. So there it is. There's the same type of PVC ankle, but done a little bit better because I got my wedge in there. This is thicker, closer to club spec. This has the angle in there, which we didn't know until we had access to some screen-used droids, and things are finally becoming more apparent to us when it comes to screen accuracy. And that's the crazy thing about the old school droid builders is when you do picture referencing, when you're looking at a picture of R2 and you're saying, okay, so if the body is 18-inch diameter, and then we measure this blue panel that the vents are in, that's supposed to be about 3 inches across. Well, you're kind of guessing, you're hypothesizing, because you're doing picture distance referencing. You can be off by as much as 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch doing that, and that's what we were doing back in the early days, is we were just taking those picture references. And it was no big deal until we started having access to some ILM droids, the Magic of Myth Tour. Some people were measuring the FAO Schwartz droid that was sitting in front of their store in Las Vegas. And then we found out later how inaccurate that was. We had access to the ILM Uber R2 that was built for the filming of episodes 2 and 3. That's where we really got our blueprints, and we realized that every little spacing and measurement was so accurate. That's when you take a droid that was done in the early days of the R2 Builders Club, doing picture size referencing, and you put it next to one that has been built from accurate blueprints, and all of a sudden those little 1/8 inch, those little 1/4 inch discrepancies really start jumping out. And in my case, some of these were even 1/2 inch discrepancies, like on that skirt height, and foot sizes, and I don't even, these feet are so inaccurate, it's so embarrassing. And I think only 2 people in 20 years have pointed out that my battery cables, I've got a 12-incher there, and I've got a 9-incher there. That's because the hardware store only had 3 12-inchers, but they had a lot of the 9-inchers. So I bought 2 of these and 2 of these, and only like a couple of people have said to me, why is your battery cable here too short? Well, all these people looking at your Droid, and things can be so insanely wrong, and only a handful of people, experienced people, Droid building people, notice, hey, that's wrong. And I'm like, ding, 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 thank you, congratulations, you're like the second person in 20 years that's noticed that. So how crude is your Droid? You could be so inaccurate in some places and nobody knows. So that is my video on so many things that are wrong, inaccurate, discrepancies. Here's, in closing, we found out later that that octagon vent is offset from the panels above it. Guess what we missed in the early days of the R2 Builders Club? They were put directly below, unless you were really paying attention to those still photographs, or if you got a still photograph from this angle that really showed it. Mistakes were made, and now with the blueprints at astromech.net, things are more screen accurate. So how crude is your Droid? I bet you mine is the worst, but it's still wowing people, and that's a huge plus. So this is Craig on my R2 channel. Catch you later.